Ideally, for any psychedelic company, the long-term trajectory goal would be to be bought out by a big pharma company. But what is exactly, like with your case in particular, that say a company like Otsuka, next steps as to what they would want to see, and how do you see that all playing and transpiring out? Hey everyone, welcome to our latest TDR Psychedelic Exclusive as we continue to dive into this space and wondering what are the next steps. What is the catalyst moment that's going to take place for a turn in this industry? And who are the companies that we continue to watch closely? So let's welcome back in. He's the CEO of Mindset Pharma, James Lanthier, which trades under the ticker symbol MSET. Good to see you again. How are things?
Shad, awesome. Great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure to have you on. Always a pleasure. And, you know, I'm not trying to pump this company. That's the last thing that we want to do. But one thing I want to make it clear to my viewers is that when we talk to people, whether it's Bay Street, Wall Street, a select few companies, a lot of these analysts that they really like, and it's based on new drugs that you're developing, pathway to revenue, potential buyout maybe later on down the road from Big Pharma, your name continues to get brought up more and more. So let's get an update as to how the company is progressing. And are you starting to see some positive momentum from like conversations that you're having with various investors?
Yeah, I mean, tons of positive momentum. The company is doing really well. Business is going, spectacularly well.
Is it?
Yeah, it's going amazingly well. We have more of a cadence of sort of announcements that looks and feels more like a real kind of biotech company now. So we're not putting out press releases every 25 minutes, but but that doesn't mean that things aren't going super well, and they are going really well. So for anyone who doesn't know, Mindset was one of the first companies to really focus on the novel drug opportunity. Really one of the first companies to file patents on novel drug designs, and then really like used a pretty classic sort of biopharma approach to try to identify, screen a whole bunch of different drugs and identify some leads. We're able to kind of really refine a process for drug discovery that I think over time has allowed us to really evolve Mindset into being a platform company. And off of kind of the strength of our IP position and off the strength of the portfolio, a year ago, we were the first company to form a big pharma partnership on some of our novel drug programs with Otsuka, and are still the only company in the space that has a big pharma partner helping us develop our programs. So, and those programs have gone, exceptionally well. So we have one program with Otsuka that's moving ahead really quickly, which is which we've talked about publicly, which is our we call Family 2, which are drugs that are sort of similar to psilocybin, but actually stronger seemingly in preclinical studies, stronger in effect size, and with a significantly shorter duration than psilocybin. So those drugs are in IND-enabling studies, and we're hoping to get them into human trials next year.
That's incredible. So the partnership with Otsuka, as you said, only company in the space right now with a partnership with a big pharma company. When was that announcement? Has that been about a year now since that was announced?
It was January of 2022.
Wow. Yeah. Where does time go? 18 months already. But in those 18 months, you're seeing a huge progress being made and the overall partnership just enhancing based on the portfolio that you're developing?
Yeah, the work in the collaboration's gone, exceptionally well. Otsuka's continued to be, huge supporters of Mindset and of the programs. So that's all been, amazing. And then, I think for investors or observers in the space, there've been, I think we can get kind of tied in knots looking at the public company valuations. But, been lots of great developments that really sort of underscore, how much momentum there is in it, and how much of an interest there is from patients in getting access to this class of drugs. So, I'm not really worried about the public market stuff, because as long as there's an actual market opportunity, which is real, that will all come along.
Yeah, commercialization will be the next step. But, as far as, looking at stocks and how it's performing, it's a new emerging industry. These are the things that are going to happen, especially when you had as many as, I think there was close to one time that I've said on previous podcasts. I think there was 400 2.5 years ago that wanted to go public. So as a result, investors are on the sidelines to figure out, okay, what's real and what's not. But one thing you pointed out was just the collaboration, obviously, with a big pharma company. So for those that, are still trying to learn the space, and I've asked you this question before in previous podcasts, when you talk about second generation psychedelic drugs, that was the selling point, the key point for obviously Otsuka to partner with you. Why? Explain further as to why that was interesting or viable for them in comparison to, say, other companies that are not focusing on that specific portion of the industry.
Yeah, so I think Otsuka are very much trailblazers if you look kind of at their history, they've always been trailblazers in psychiatry, and I think they had the point of view that we had, that our founders had anticipated in pharma, which was that ultimately pharma would be really interested in this class of drugs, and as the data just kind of continued to now improve out.
Yeah.
But would view the first generation drugs, the psilocybins, LSD, etc., as being really a good proof of concept for what psychedelic medicine was capable of, but that they would naturally gravitate towards newer drugs that had been optimized to make up for some of the shortcomings in first generation drugs, and that would have stronger intellectual property rights. And I think based on all of our content, key. Absolutely key, right? There's everybody, even if you're not in the pharma world, everybody's heard of generic drugs.
Yep.
Big pharma. Every drug ends up ultimately, if it's a successful category, it ends up going generic once the patents run off. But that's not where big pharma starts. Big pharma they always start with drugs where you can patent the underlying molecule, the active pharmaceutical ingredient. You're not going to kind of fight the laws of gravity on that. That's how their business is set up, and that's how they're able to. They can only generate the margins that they need to bring a drug to market by owning drugs that have strong IP rights.
Of course.
It's just how it works. Yeah. So that was the viewpoint of our founders when they set the company up, and I think so far they've been kind of proven right. I would say, we've talked to lots of other pharma companies, and it isn't they all know the data around the first generation drugs, but who knows, maybe someone will end up partnering with the first generation drug company, but based on the conversations we've had, I think that's very unlikely, and I think
really?
Most of their interest is around figuring out, how or where maybe they enter the space through novel drugs.
So what's that say then?
I think.
What's that say for the industry then? You're going to have to see a lot of people pivot then, correct?
Well, that's not to say that there isn't going to be a market for first generation drugs. There will, I think, because psilocybin and MDMA are going to get approved, and in a world of off-label prescriptions, there'll be, I think there'll probably be, a lot of generic competition in those spaces. And so I think there'll be a real market for first generation drugs. It's just that for pharma, they're going to need drugs that are not only, this is where I think there's a higher bar to climb in the space, which is what Mindset has tried to do. It's not enough to just have a drug that's psychedelic therapeutic, that's novel. You need to have a drug that actually is both novel and that offers some improvements and differentiation from the first generation drugs. And that's what Mindset's tried to do. consist, from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, you and I talked off camera before we started this. So just writing this down, that Sprovato, Johnson & Johnson, did $130 million last quarter alone. So that's a sign of things to come, which is going to obviously grab the attention, right?
It's a huge sign. It's a huge sign. That is a drug that's not actually a psychedelic drug, that works for some people but has some limitations to it, and that has a lot of competition from generic ketamine, and that is it mainly very, not impossible, but very difficult to get in the USA insurance coverage for, and is a drug that I think a lot of commentators, observers in the space didn't think was a success for Janssen.
Yet $130 million, yet $130 million in a quarter.
And growing over 80% year over year.
Wow.
Like that's a drug that's on a trajectory with all those, potentially knocks against it, is on a trajectory to be a blockbuster drug. So that tells you it tells you something, I think, about the demand from patients for this type of therapeutic.
Well, I've said again a couple times in a couple podcasts before, and I'll bring this up to you, but 14 million people in the US alone currently suffering from PTSD. And if there's real data that shows even more compelling data and efficacy versus, say, a drug like this, I don't want to put numbers, but this is what I'm trying to educate people on as to how much potential this industry has moving forward. And we've barely even started, right?
barely even started.
Yeah. I want to focus on news that you had earlier this year. Back in March, you announced a partnership with Pharmala, and it's the first sale of pharmaceutical grade psilocybin into the Australian market. Obviously, the Australian market made big news earlier this year, where the TGA, otherwise known as the Australia's Therapeutic Goods Administration, which is equivalent to the FDA in Health Canada, they permitted the prescription of psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression, and that will begin on July 1st. So have you formulated any indication of what the market demand will look like for future sales as we kind of in some ways stay on this topic?
I mean, I think it's still early days, but I know that based on all of our conversations with Pharmala, like they are seeing a lot of demand and a lot of interest.
Yeah.
So our synthesis process on psilocybin is really not the focus of our business. Like, as you know, like the focus is on new drugs. We invented this process that we think is the most efficient one in the market. And so we were looking to kind of commercialize it. And Pharmala is a great organization to do that through, because that's selling these first generation drugs is really much closer to kind of their focus. But yeah, like whether it's Australia or to researchers in the rest of the world, they seem to have like no shortage of sales leads. So
I know.
So it's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to know, like, we talk about the revenue potential and as well, again, the partnership with Otsuka. How do you see this playing out? Like, ideally for any psychedelic company, the long-term trajectory goal would be to be bought out by a big pharma company. But what is exactly, like with your case in particular, that, say, a company like Otsuka, next steps as to what they would want to see, and how do you see that all playing and transpiring out?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is all public, right? So our collaboration with Otsuka is designed to, it's focused on two different families of drugs, two different kind of classes of drugs. They provide funding for those two families to the end of phase one. And then at the end of phase one, they have a right of first refusal to hopefully negotiate, a new deal if they like what they've seen so far on one or both of those families. So, that's essentially, with that collaboration, that's what we're focused on is developing drugs that, hopefully will be, useful enough and valuable enough for them that they're interested in a bigger collaboration, bigger partnership at the end of phase one. What likely would be something like, if we're successful, something like an out licensing, partnership. And if you look those up, those are sort of significantly larger than what the current arrangement that we have with them. That's essentially, if you're a drug discovery company, that's really what you're playing for, is an out licensing commercial arrangement, which are huge, big sort of step moment value inflection points in a company's life, or can be.
I've spoken to a few other CEOs who've been meeting with different institutions, analysts in New York and in Toronto, and all are very interested in the space, but they're waiting for that next kind of like catalyst announcement pertaining to the industry. Do you think that announcement could be the FDA approving MDMA? Do you think that could be the turning point for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of anticipation around the MAPS data coming out this year. I mean, you've had guests on and chatted about that, and I would completely agree. That's a big.
So you think those readouts could be just as equivalent to an announcement that the FDA approving? I'm sure it is, right?
Institutional biotech investors will get behind, I think, anything at the right price if it has efficacy. And if the MAPS readout shows, kind of conclusive efficacy, then that's really big. Yeah, that's really big. And then obviously actual FDA approval is going to. It's been a while, right? We've been talking about this space. You've been interviewing people. A lot of this has been sort of like hypothetical, right? Talking about what the future will look like once patients actually end up getting treated with this, with these drugs. That will make this that much more concrete for everybody, including investors.
Well, the first time we interviewed and met, I think we both had big froey hair, didn't we, James? Am I correct?
Yeah.
That's the sign of the times. But yeah, any emerging industry, it's a lot of work, but I can't help but feel that based on the data, some of the insurance codes that are going to be approved, Australia making the announcement, I think that's good on paper. I'm curious to see how the rollout will be come July 1st. Do you have any kind of inclination as to how that will look?
I don't. I pay attention. I pay some attention to it, like I do all the developments in the space. But my focus is really on drug companies as opposed to markets like Australia. But I'll be watching it like everybody else. We'll love to see what happens, and I hope it's a success. I hope I hope 109 in Oregon is a success. I think there's room for lots of different approaches in the space, and this sort of wellness versus medical approach is people make more out of the differences between those approaches than I think is maybe helpful. But yeah, I'm watching it all and hoping that it all works out, and that the regimes that get set up don't sort of accidentally, I'm excited about it all.
Makes sense. The news cycle has been relatively quiet for you, over this last spring, as you indicated. We don't need to be pushing out press releases every 25 minutes, but for your investors watching this, what is the primary focal point for the next quarter to 2 quarters?
Yeah, so for those following Mindset, closely, or more closely, I think we are still moving forward, executing on the plan, which was to really step Mindset up from being a very well validated preclinical biotech drug discovery company towards being a clinical stage company. And so what's involved in that is moving MSP 1014 forward into first in human trials in the UK. where we're waiting for final feedback from the MHRA, and then moving one or more of the Otsuka programs forward into clinical trials. And I think I see all that happening in the next 12 months. That's what we're focused on. We're not putting out press releases every 15 minutes because that doesn't make sense, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a huge amount of work going on to make those two things happen.
Yeah. Well,
but if you want to talk to us, you want more color, please reach out. I'm happy to talk anytime.
That's going to be the nature of the industry. Going to be quiet for a long time, and probably most investors will miss out on the first 20% upswing, but that's biotech in a whole, right?
That's biotech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, appreciate the update. Tell Joe I say hi, and enjoy this weather. And, I'm sure the summer months, you guys will be hard at work, but if not, try to get some time off. But most importantly, let's keep in touch.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks so much for having me on. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.